Hey everyone. Before we start with the episode, I wanted to give a big shout out to a PayPal supporter that we had this month. Coach Doug Dorio, assistant men's basketball coach at Penn State Shenango, was very gracious and donated to our PayPal this month, and I can't say how appreciative I am for his support. If you want to support the show, you can do so at PayPal and find our username at bballteacherpod. Any donation is a huge help for our hosting fees for our audio or as a way to show support for the show. So, again, really appreciate it, Coach Dorio, for supporting the show. And with that, we're on to the episode.
Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from or whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all of the support, all of the emails, all the questions, all the things that you've sent to me. I love hearing from you guys. Love hearing all your suggestions for topics or hearing about the things that you're going through and all the stuff that's going on in your coaching world. It's really fascinating to connect with y'all. And as I was just kind of talking about with my guests before we started recording, one of the challenges that I know that we face in this current coaching culture is with transfers and people maybe not sticking with the game or kind of falling out of love with the game of basketball. It really kind of drives home the importance of relationship building and maintaining strong relationships with our players so that not only they continue, playing this great game, but hopefully continue to play with us and don't look to, go elsewhere. And so I love talking about relationship building. I love hearing from coaches who have stories and things that they can share about how to build successful relationships, really build that, strong cultural piece, reach those, maybe quote unquote tougher kids who take a little bit longer time to develop in the relationship sense. And also kind of talking about it from a team aspect too, as a lot of you listening know probably about team drama, gossip, things like that can really derail a program. Kind of talk about how to kind of avoid those things and keep things positive and keep all your players kind of on the same mission. So that's what we're going to jump right into today. And of course, I don't do this alone. I'm very happy to be joined today by the head varsity girls basketball coach for the Richmond Lady Red Devils out in Indiana. Joining me today, Coach Gabby Smith. Again, Coach, really appreciate you being able to come on here and talk to us today. How are things going?
Coach Hernandez, first and foremost, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the podcast. It's going pretty well. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about relationships and all things basketball. That's my love right there.
Fantastic. Coach, let's jump into you and your basketball journey and your coaching journey. Talk to us about where this game of basketball has taken you and ultimately how did you end up with the Richmond Lady Red Devils?
Awesome. So from Kokomo, Indiana, originally played there. Kokomo's very historic, especially on the women's side for state championships and things like that. So I've been in a program, especially a good feeder program, filled with nothing but love and basketball. That's all I know. And I'm going to Indiana State on Fort Wright academically, but I was one of the managers, which eventually became helping out a lot of the Dobo work, and then became an assistant to the recruiting coordinator at Indiana State, where I got my master's as well with the Indiana State women's basketball program, where I eventually became an assistant at Rose Holman under John Prevost, and was with him for about 2 years, and then ended up getting Richmond Lady Red Devils opportunity. So it's a blessing. It's an honor. My journey's been different because I didn't play in college, but being around the game, being around a lot of smart coaches, I was able to kind of instill my own way of thinking, but also gain a different perspective from the coaches and the players by being around everyone. So it's been pretty amazing in my book.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know that you also talked about with me about how, you really kind of jumped into this position, kind of late. Getting that position in August, like you told me, is definitely not the beginning of the off season for sure. And
Right.
I was curious about, when you take over a program, kind of that late in the summer, how did you kind of figure out like what you wanted to do as your first steps? How did you kind of prioritize the things that you wanted to like kind of get done right away?
Well, it's funny you say that because being a faith-based person, it was all God. I'm being big on praying and big on just being led. But in that, the first steps, honestly, were being the players.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about X's and O's for me. It was about meeting the players, seeing who they were, and getting a feel of them. So going back to relationships, I need their trust, especially being a female head coach there, which a lot of the players hadn't had their 4 years there here at Richmond. So I was big on just that relationship aspect of knowing who I was. Heck, the first day I was there, it's funny, I met all the seniors.
Okay.
So being big on relationship, my biggest goal was to meet the players. Those were there because I came in, I want to say it's around August. So I wanted to meet all the players, but the main ones were the seniors that were coming in. It kind of helped them with some school stuff and then getting a relationship with the younger players as well.
Yeah, that's so important when you take over that program because with those seniors, right? Like they're there's a few things where one, this is their last year, so this is
Right.
really important to them, and two, for some of them, they who knows how many head coaches they may have had, whether they've had somebody who they've
Mm-hmm.
been with and knew for a while, or maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
used to having different coaches. I imagine for them it was really important to get a sense of like, hey, is this person who's going to be my coach for my final year of high school somebody
Right.
who really cares about me and is going to invest in me. So like making that a priority, I can
Mm-hmm.
imagine, hopefully, made a really big impression on them that, okay, this person,
Mm-hmm.
really cares and really wants, what's best for me.
Well, it's funny, Coach Hernandez, because when I met them, we talked about a lot of things, and the first thing they did was just began crying, and it wasn't
Oh,
out of
really?
sadness, but it was one of those moments where you could feel the love on each end, and they understood
Yeah.
I'm here to help them, benefit them, and to support them through this process of having another coach my senior year. And I want to go to school and play basketball. That itself can do something to a student's mind, an athlete's mind, but trying to make decisions on what they're going to do. And it was a wonderful experience. I wouldn't take it back for the world because I love how I came in because it allowed
Hmm.
me time and the focus to be on the program, but the girls. So I didn't have a choice but to build relationships, and that was the biggest thing we had to do there at Richmond.
Yeah, yeah, to just jump right in and get that relationship. I know,
Yeah.
no, that's a great point. I know we're going to focus a lot of this conversation talking about relationship building, but I did want to make sure I asked before we kind of really jump into that, Coach, about as a coach, what is your kind of like X's and O's philosophy? What are the things on the court that you really like to do both offensively and defensively?
So I will say I am definitely going with the defense first. I'm a big man coach. I'm not a fan of zone. We do some zone concepts, but I'm big on man to man. Getting in your face, tough defense, um, active hand, just being active on defense, and applying pressure and making other teams uncomfortable. I'm big on that. I feel like at Richmond we are very athletic, so we
Hmm.
can do a lot of things that some teams probably can't because we have the skill work, the athleticism, the agility to actually get down the court and move and defend. Offensively, I'm big on just playing the motion offense, dribble drive. Once again, being athletic, being able to get down the court, quick in transition, first three steps, just getting up and going. I get excited by the type of stuff because there's so much you can do when you have athletic teams. And offensively, when you're able to get up and down the court and kind of outwork and outbeat your other opponents, it's fun to play, it's fun to watch. So
And yeah, that I think is also a way that can really get players to buy in when they have, a
yes.
new coach is that play style and they're playing a way that's like exciting and it's up tempo and you're really getting up and down. I think there's just like a
Mm-hmm.
certain level of excitement of okay, this is something that like I really want to play for because this is kind of a fun, enjoyable, like
Mm-hmm.
really exciting way to play basketball.
Mm-hmm. It sure is. It is. And you're able to do team bonding on the court with stuff like that because you're
Hmm.
allowing your players to work together and to build offensively because your defense turns into your offense. When you're getting up into the other opponent's faces and you're getting up in their space, easy steals happen if everybody just takes off. So now we're having a track practice at times to kind of get down the court, see who can get the quickest layup, who can get there the quickest. You're competing
Yeah.
within each other, but still building, and it's a pretty fun atmosphere I try to bring about.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, that's fantastic. So as we kind of transition now into the topic, Coach, let's kind of start with, in your experience, in your opinion, what do you think is like the biggest key for a coach to build successful relationships with their players?
That's a great question. The first thing is honesty, being very honest and transparent with your players. Um, I feel like when you are trying to build relationships, you got to be yourself. And in that means having honest, hard conversations. That means being a genuine person who you are, coming into here at Richmond and me with my seniors, I was honest that I wanted to build the program, how important they were, but in that process, being honest with them on where they were in their development, whether it was not so much building, but how good are we? How do we get better? What do you need to work on? But going back to the relationship aspect of it, how to be a good teammate, how to come to me and have tough conversations about things you may not like, but why it's important to have those things. And being able to have accountability and trust. That's what builds into that. If I can hold you accountable, be my best player, you can trust me in what I want from you, how great I want you to be. And the biggest thing is really just being honest, transparent, and just that accountability piece of it. You always have love, you always have tough love, but the honest and transparent part lets them know that you care about them, lets them know that you are there for them, because you don't want to just give them something they want to hear, but you want to build them up in the right way.
Was having those honest or transparent conversations with your players, was that something that they had been used to? Was that something that they had to kind of take a little bit of time in terms of, having conversations like that? Because I know all players kind of take kind of take that a little bit differently, especially for players who may have not have been talked to with such honesty before. So I'm curious about, like, was that something that your players were good with right away, or did it take a little bit of time to adjust to being talked
Well,
to in a
it,
honest and transparent manner?
well, that's an even greater question. Yeah, it took some time because they didn't know me. That was the biggest thing. So I had to let them know who I was. I wasn't a basketball coach. I was also a teacher. So a lot of our conversations weren't just basketball. It was, hey, what do you like to do in your free time? What gives you peace? Have you visited different schools? Just things outside of basketball, because we were together so much during the season. I wanted to get to know them as the person, the young lady that they are.
Right.
Anybody could be a basketball player, but who are you as a person? Because that plays a role in your basketball ability as well. Are you a good teammate? What does that look like? Having conversations about being good people, being able to love each other and build sisterhoods and have tough conversations with each other outside of basketball. Because a lot of times, a lot of girls, it's funny, a lot of the drama they deal with isn't always basketball drama. It's dealing with boyfriends, or it's dealing with schoolwork and we're in class, or it's other stuff that you don't think about that comes on
Yeah.
the court. It's kind of funny because it's like, man, I remember going through it as a young athlete, but it's different now. It's very different now.
Yeah, like you bring up like something that's really also like interesting is that you navigated this kind of building those relationships with
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of time necessarily to get to know them as people. You really had to like invest a lot of time and
Mm-hmm.
make it a priority because you didn't come in, you know, having, months to get to know them and do, things that, maybe other coaches did. So not only are you investing in the basketball stuff and want to get all that done, but your players need to know that you care about them as people. So I can definitely tell that that was something that was really important to you. You definitely are putting emphasis on, I need to know who you are as a
Mm-hmm.
person too, because that matters more to me than just who you are as a
Mm-hmm.
basketball player.
Well, Coach Hernandez also, when they graduate and they come through 4 years in Richmond, you want them to
Yeah.
come back. That's the biggest thing. That's one thing I had at Kokomo when I was growing up. We had players that had graduated to come back and instill love with us, and still a sisterhood within us, that if we ever went anywhere that they may have been, whether it was college, another city, we knew of them and we knew them well enough, we could always call and talk to them. And those are the things why it's important to have relationships, because if you ever need anything, okay, hey, I had a teammate that went and did this. Like, you try to make it more of a college type realm on having a sisterhood, because you understand these 4 years in high school you won't get back.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so as you're building that, that's why it's also important. That's why I love working in the school system, because I get to check their grades. I get to check on them in classes. How are they doing? Go and talk to them during lunchtime. Seeing them outside of the court is big as well, because they just see you as one thing, a basketball coach. They don't. It's hard to separate at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, no,
I got to build
definitely.
with them in that aspect of outside of basketball. And I think we may have had more times out off the court than we did on, because I got to be with them and have relationships with them. That was the bigger thing for me.
And you definitely made it like a priority, right?
Yes.
That it's something that the players they know, and I think they know when a coach is making it a priority for them to be visible and seen off of the court. And it's not always easy to do, and I know coaches have busy lives and a lot of things going on, but I think to your point, if a player only sees you as like a basketball coach and they never like see you in any other setting or in any other
Right.
sense, I really
Yeah.
do think that it can be kind of limiting because instead of this coach maybe being like a big part of different aspects of their life, they're kind of only in that basketball coach realm. And so it's super
Mhm.
important, I think, for players to see that coach as a person with outside of the court, just like it's important, like you said, for coaches to see their players because man, some of these players, that their lives and the things that they do and the interests that they have, it's pretty amazing when you get to see them outside of the court, what they got going
Yes.
on, right?
Yes. Yes. And how talented they are outside of basketball that you can go and support. I have a player right now. She's a dancer.
Oh,
They're called
really?
the Devilettes. Yeah. She has a performance coming up this weekend. I'm going to go and support and see her. But she choreographed the entire thing, but she's
Wow,
also a ball player, and the crazy thing is she wasn't fond of basketball, but she wanted to play because she enjoyed her teammates and being coached by and being my staff. So
that's
it's
so
stuff
cool.
like that. I think about like, man, we really impacted their lives just by playing basketball, and things outside of that. But I'm sorry, Clark, I get excited about this type of stuff because
Oh
I
no, oh
love,
no, it's so cool
I
because
love I
like
love the game, coach, and I
yeah.
love building young women to be great. So I love relationships. I love relationships.
Yeah, and I mean, how rewarding is it like also to just kind of see like these players like you mentioned just like thrive in other areas and like just
Right.
be leaders and succeed in other areas because I talk about this with a lot of people about how we don't want our basketball players to only learn basketball in our program, right? We want them to be successful and thrive and use basketball as a way to
Mhm.
succeed in other areas and other aspects of life. And like when we teach like leadership on a basketball court or teaching like how to be good teammates, and then you see them be leaders in other areas or great like people and cooperate with others, it's like,
Right.
oh man, how like it's really cool to be a part of that process. That's so
Right.
awesome to hear about. Like that's cool, a dancer too and leading all that. That's
There
awesome.
you go. Yeah.
That's really cool. So I guess kind of on the other side of that coin, I know every situation is a little bit different, and every coach has their own unique situations of players, but there are going to be situations maybe where a coach kind of struggles to make that connection, or they have trouble quote unquote reaching that player. So for a coach in general who might be struggling with that, what advice might you give them in order to try and make that connection with that player who may be a little bit tougher to connect with, so to speak?
Hmm. Well, the first thing I would say is to never stop trying. A lot of times, you know, coaches tend to give up when it's that hard with players because you just can't get through, but you can't stop trying because you never know what your players are dealing with outside of basketball. But it's finding different things. It could be something as simple as giving them their favorite piece of candy, or it could be something as simple as hearing them talk to their other teammates and TV shows. And you might bring up that, but just finding the small things to build on top of with those players, and that might trigger something to kind of build that relationship. But just always find different creative ways to be able to bond with them, because it may take to their senior year till you get the relationship you really want from them, because as they're maturing, you're maturing as well within them, and it's not easy when you have players that you don't bond with right away that you might with others, but you got to keep finding different ways that are creative to be able to build and learn from them, along with learning them on how to build a better relationship.
Hmm. Do you were those situations things that you personally had, whether it was this past season or before that, or did you find that all of the players that you had, you were able to kind of connect with relatively easily?
See, and it's funny because I'm a PE teacher. I've always been a
Okay,
PE teacher, so I deal with various kids, whether
right.
some that want to be a part, participate, some that don't, and you have to learn and find different ways how to connect with kids. And that's the biggest thing is realize we're in a social media time, but understanding how to connect with kids, and part of that comes from just learning them, letting them talk. Sometimes you just be quiet and listening. They may say something that might spark your interest or might make you figure out a different way that might be creative to build with them in the relationship, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, some players and just people in general and kids that I've worked with, I think are more used to being like talked at a lot or having a
Yes.
lot of people like say stuff to them or give them
Yes.
orders or instructions and speak all the time. And, I've found that I've had players even who whether it's at home or at school, they really don't feel like they have much of a voice and they don't really
Yes.
feel comfortable like speaking or sharing things out. And if you like intentionally allow them that space or say like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to like just listen and I'm not gonna like
Mm-hmm.
really say anything if you want to talk, like just for them to have that platform where it's like, okay, when I'm ready, if I feel ready, I
Mm-hmm.
know that this coach or this adult will listen to me and I can just talk when maybe I
Mm-hmm.
don't really get that opportunity elsewhere.
Well, and coach, I've had a player. So thinking back, I had a player who wouldn't talk to me at all, and it wasn't
Oh
that
wow. Yeah.
she didn't like me at all. It was more of she didn't know how to talk to me. So we would start to practice almost every other day, and she would get shots up, and it would be quiet, but I was there. I was present with her, and then she began to warm up to me because she's seeing that I cared, and she would say small little things that we would talk about, whether it's food or how class went or how school was. And then eventually, as time grew and the more consistent I was with her in that relationship, I'm trying to build it, she began to open up. And now we're, close. But it took time on being patient and sometimes not saying anything at all, just listening, you
Hmm.
know, what she has to say, and like you said, letting them feel heard. And I think we're in the business too. Once again, we're really teachers. We can say we're coaches, but we're teaching young people, how to thrive in adversity.
Right.
So the importance of being in a relationship is showing them how to deal with life. And
Hmm.
basketball just happens to be that middle ground sometimes.
You brought up something that I think is super important that um I know I didn't really think a lot about when I first started coaching is that or even teaching rather, and I learned this over time, is that we can't assume that our players really know how to comfortably talk to adults or have
Yep.
those conversations because everyone's home life is different, everyone's situations are different, and I've coached players who don't have a great home life and their experience interacting with adults has not been positive, and it's not anything that I did wrong, it's just that they don't have like good role models or didn't have good
Mm-hmm.
role models. And I think like to your point of just like being there and being present and knowing that just beyond being a basketball coach for some players to just trust you as people, everyone's like timetable for that is different because of their situations. And so to what it is, the point that you brought up about like sometimes you're just there and you're not pushing the relationship but you're just
Mm-hmm.
allowing yourself to be available and then just kind of letting it happen as it naturally evolves, sounds like what you
Yeah.
did there.
Yeah. And part of that too, is they're learning themselves. They're learning, what they like, what they don't like. They're trying to figure themselves out in the midst of being in high school, growing up, having coaches that are hard on them, but having tough love.
Yeah.
They're balancing life as a young teenager, in high school, you know. But like I said, to me, it's joyous to me, and I love it because I'm in a process of impacting lives. And I keep saying it, I love what I do. I
Yeah.
love being a part of girls basketball. I love teaching. I love what I do. So for me, this is like my lane. This is
Hmm.
why I just love to do it. So it's helpful as I learn. I'm probably getting off a tangent, but just being a part, and impacting and helping. That's the biggest thing. I love to do that.
Right.
And like so you don't know what they're going through. So
Yeah.
basketball can be that middle thing, that middle ground to build that relationship, to correlate
Hmm.
that.
Oh,
So
I had a player. This was 2 years ago who pretty much said like basketball is like the thing that like has kept me through school and like kept
yeah,
me going to school and kept me at school and like they were like I don't know if I'd even go to school or like I'd want to drop out, but like basketball is something that like keeps me going. And then
yeah,
like through that experience of continuing to play basketball and sticking around in high school, then they kind of figured out what they wanted to do after high school. Where as if they didn't have it, who knows, maybe they would have dropped out when they were 16 and not really
right.
figured out anything. And it's it's just we talk about, like, I think as coaches all the time how impactful the game of basketball can be, but man, it really hits you sometimes when you hear from your players about
Yes.
how much that experience has meant to them. I think for me, it's really humbling to know like how huge of an impact, the program and basketball has made on players' lives, and really is humbling for me to think of like, wow, like this is the, great responsibility, and I mean great in the best way possible, the great responsibility I get to like make sure that this experience is as great for my players as it can be.
Right. And it's funny, having players, especially players that are about to graduate, they tell you how much they love you, how much they appreciate you. But I think for someone like myself, it's hard to sometimes accept sometimes because it's like, man, I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be there to
Hmm.
support you, because that's what I grew up on. It was like people loved me and helped me because they loved the game, but they also loved me as a person and how you impact. And yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
You brought this up a couple of times, Coach Gabby, and I am curious how you do this, because there's tons of different ways to do this, and every coach does it a little bit differently. But you've mentioned how all the relationship building and all the care and all the love that you pour to your players is also combined with the fact that you are hard on your players and that you are
Mhm.
pushing your players to be the best that they can be. And so for you, how do you kind of go about, pushing them and really, getting them out of their comfort zone and making them better basketball players, while also at the same time with them knowing that like you still really care about them, and you're pouring your love into them while also pushing them at the same time.
Of course, the biggest thing I would say is I set high standards, and I try to set clear expectations, so they automatically know, what to expect with what I want from them. And in that, I'm big on encouraging a growth mindset while also trying to provide good feedback. And it's kind of it's hard to explain because when I'm building that relationship with you, as I'm pushing you and being hard on you, you automatically know I'm giving you tough love. This is why, once again, you have to have the balance of on the court, off the court. Because when I'm on the court, you know what I expect. I don't tolerate anything less than that. But because I have a relationship with you, you understand it's tough love and I'm not being mean. So going back
Mhm.
to like your best player, I'm very hard on my best player. But I have to be, because if I'm not hard on my best player, I'm giving leeway to anything can just happen. It goes back to self love. I'm trying to teach and discipline my players to be better, whether it's on the court or off the court. It's the expectation of understanding. It's a growth mindset of being better. You're saying how. I think it's just being consistent. What I allow, what I don't, and just having clear expectations of what I require and nothing less. You know,
Are those are those expectations that you have for your players, like I imagine those are things that you're kind of laying out, or those kind of like the day one, conversations you're having with your team about here are the expectations, and you're like consistently, reinforcing those and making sure that, all the players never forget them throughout the year?
Oh yeah, so we have a list in our locker room of what it means to be a great teammate, what it means to be a great player, and even a great coach. Because you have to
Mhm.
lead by example. You know, so expectations, being on time, making sure your shirt's tucked in, making sure you gave a teammate high five today, and make sure a coach seen it because you want to make sure you're incorporating physical touch. Um, but just every day being consistent about what you require on the court. Whether it's even hustling. I don't coach energy and I don't coach effort. Like you have to bring that. That's an expectation that is mandatory because that's part of the game, but also it's part of life, man. Who wants to go around life being upset all the time? Having good energy,
Yeah.
and giving effort to everything you put your mind to, whether it's your schoolwork, whether it's your practice, because it benefits you in the long run how you live your life. And that's why I keep correlating life and basketball because that's what it is.
Right.
But definitely, like I said, they see it every time they walk into the locker room. I'm big on visuals because some children, some students and athletes are visual learners. So if they
Yeah.
see it every time they walk into the locker room, they understand this is what we do. If I keep referencing it during practice, that I've now got them again the second time. They've seen it, now they've heard it. So it's like a double take now, if that makes any sense. But every day it's a standard on what I require, and it's nothing less. you know. And then even in that, so I've heard some coaches talk about signing contracts, for
Okay.
students and all that. I've thought about it, but I'm big on keeping your word. We can sign a
Yeah.
contract, that's fine, but being a woman of your word and sticking to it, to me, is as valuable as you signing a contract.
Yeah, and that's probably something that, players maybe have never really experienced before, even like teenagers in general, this concept of like, hey, what you say or it's like what your word
Yes.
is the same thing as it being like in paper. And to have that lesson be taught to your players of like the things that you say matter, and when you agree to something or you say you want to be a part of something like that, those words have meaning. That's a real powerful lesson, I imagine, for
Hmm.
players and people in general at such a young age to kind of just think about like, oh, I can't, say something unless I really mean it. If I say to agree to something or say I'm going to do something,
Yes, you
there's
do
that
it.
expectation that like there needs to be a follow through because I said that
Yeah.
I was going to do it.
Well, and now that you are a part of any program, when you go into the community, that's who you are.
Right.
You're no longer just a Richmond High School student. You're a Richmond Lady Red Devil now. So if you
Yeah.
said you're going to go and do community service, you need to be there. If you said you're going to help this person, like it's just being a person of your word. That's where that trust comes in at. That's where the relationship comes in at, and accountability. All those things go hand in hand for what we require, what our expectations are, our standards. And it may seem like a lot as we talk about it, but it's really simple. It's really simple. Sometimes we overthink things because we make it harder than what it has to be. But kind of, say what you mean, what you say, but stick to your word.
Yeah.
Stick to your word.
And with that, there's this piece, and I'm curious if how this has kind of worked out for you, Coach, where players then need to be holding each other accountable because obviously
Yes.
you're not going to be there all the time. You don't hear every single thing that players say to each other, players do, and for that accountability to be in
Mm-hmm.
place, like players themselves have to kind of check one another and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they're doing that. And is that something that you kind of worked through this year where, players were needing to hold each other accountable, or you had situations where players kind of had to hold each other accountable?
Well, it's funny you said, because in the beginning it was a struggle, and not that it. I think you have to teach how to hold players accountable and
Yeah.
accountability, because if you don't know, it's kind of like that's where that bickering comes in. That's where you have your issues at. So when you set clear expectations, it's kind of alleviates all of the nonsense. So
Hmm.
once I get on my tough, my best player, or my most skilled player, I'll say that, um, when we see her lacking or see him lacking, you then have your underclassmen who will start to get on those upperclassmen players, because everybody's working for that spot, fighting for that spot, and they see, you're like, hey, what's going on? Because everybody wants to compete,
Hmm.
and then that's when you have leadership. So they have your young girls being leaders as well with your upperclassmen, because you're teaching them in that manner. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and your players like they want to be successful, right? And they
Yes.
want to do well, and when you have a lot of players who are putting in the work, and there's one or two who are maybe not, like obviously that's going to be something that's really important to them, but to that point of kind of what we talked about too, what I think is so powerful in that is if those players respond to that, if those players are okay with being held accountable by their
Mm-hmm.
teammates. Because I think if you have that environment where players are okay
Mm-hmm.
with their teammates calling them out and they'll respond to that, like that tells me that like, man, this program and the relationships built in this program, they have to be really deep if a player can be called out and like accept it and make a change off of it.
Well, and it's in that, like I said, even in the beginning, it was difficult because you don't know how to adjust to a younger player getting on an older player, or how older players getting on a younger player, because the culture has not been there to be able to actually fit and mold that. So when
Hmm.
you start setting those standards of what it's supposed to look like, whether it means being a good teammate, and what a good teammate is. A good teammate isn't always not so much not being nice, but you're holding each other accountable. You're being honest. You're being loving. You're building a relationship within each other where you can talk to that teammate, and hold them accountable. And it's not so much that it's personal, but it's for the betterment of the team.
Yeah.
So you build on that. But it took a lot of work. I'll tell you that. It took a lot of work, a lot of team bonding, and a lot of times once again, I read a lot, I hear a lot, and I watch a lot of videos where a lot of coaches talk about how much sometimes some players don't like spending all that time together because we're playing together, we practice together, the team, but it's so worth it because of the accountability piece.
Mm-hmm. Oh
When you
yeah.
have that relationship, you can do that.
Yeah, and as like the final, like not the final, but one of like the other big indicators, and I know I've been in that as well, and I knew that like we were headed in the right direction when this happened is when players like held me accountable to things. Because I've had days where I've like kind of walked in the gym and I feel like my energy maybe wasn't as high or as great as it should have been,
Oh,
and I have a
yes,
player
yes,
say like, "Hey, like what's going on? Like what's
right.
happening?" I'm like, "Oh man, like yeah, you're right." Like to have that, but like that's super important that when a player feels comfortable enough to do that,
Yeah,
then I'm like, "Okay, this is good." Like you should feel like
yeah.
you can have that conversation with me because if I'm gonna have these standards for everyone and the team's going to be, holding each other to them. They got to hold me to the same ones.
There you
Otherwise,
go.
do they really matter if not everyone in the program is held to that standard?
Well, and then it feels, yes, everyone in the program has that standard. Sometimes my sisters will get on me, hey, coach, you all right? Everything
Hmm.
okay? Get your energy up. I'm big on energy. I'm big on, keeping that because it keeps that flow going. And I'm not gonna say it feels good, but it does feel good when your players can come to you, hey, coach, are you okay?
Oh
Everything all
yeah.
right? Because they know they're watching you first and foremost, but also they care because when you're off your game or something's wrong, they can feel it because the energy's changed, but also accountability. If I'm coming in saying we got to do this and we're keeping that momentum up there at a high level, the moment it's down with me, they can feel it.
Hmm. And it's like the
And
whole energy changes,
whole
right? Everything
everything.
seems
So
different, right?
there you go. So in those situations, you love it because they understand what you're trying to say now. They're
Hmm.
getting it. They're getting
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, for sure. And even and also kind of as the final piece to this obviously is also coaches, holding each other accountable where you
Yeah.
gotta, I've had to talk to people on my staff, they've had to talk to me, and it's always I feel like the best part of that and the best conversations I've had, and I've even had them this past year with like disagreements or things that like we're kind of unsure of each other about is like all those conversations were framed of like what is going to be best for the team. And
Right.
everyone's kind of looking at it through that lens of like what do we
Right.
need to do to like help our players out, help this team and help this program out as best we
Right.
can. It's like, okay, these are productive conversations because we're all working towards the same thing.
Right. Right. And having the same common goal and vision
Hmm.
is huge. When we so the sectional game we played, we made it past the first round. I guess it'd been like 19 years since that had happened. And going into that, we talked about accountability. We talked about someone puts their head down, you lift their head up and get on them
Hmm.
about it. The small things that we echo in practice and transfer to the game, but also even outside of that, the day of a sectional game, how are players acting in class? How are they throughout the school? Where's everybody's mind at? Like, there's
Yeah.
so much that just goes into that. And, it's crazy, coach. As a first year, I learned so much so fast. I think I was so hungry to build a culture. And we say the word culture so much, it's really nothing but habits.
Right.
I was so hungry to build the right habits of accountability, of relationships, that it started to manifest itself to happen for itself to where some things I wouldn't have to do or say, they would do it within themselves. So
It's
then my job got easier
it's
because they were
easier.
so close and connected. It just blossomed. And no,
Yeah.
this has been an amazing year. I'll say that.
Coach, something that a lot of teams, always have to be aware of or think about or have in their mind is players, especially teenagers and young adults that I know you and I both work with is, you know, potential things about drama, building up or gossip building
Hmm.
up. We're in situations, of course, if everyone's got, group chats with each other, people see each other out in, the hallways or have classes with each other. And those sort of things can just eat away at a team and really cause a lot of problems. And so, for you, what was kind of your like message or the way that you kind of went about addressing your team about how to avoid all of that and how to make sure that like your teammates didn't get involved in that sort of thing with each other?
Open, honest communication, and let it. And I'm very straightforward with my players. So when I would hear about things, I would go directly to the source to make sure what was being said or what had been done or whatnot, whatever that looks like. Um, was handled taken care of right away. Because what you don't want is things to fester and then it becomes a problem with the entire program, the entire group, when it could have been settled right then and there between those two players or those few players. But also, I call them like, once again, a sisterhood. You're going to have
Hmm.
issues, you're going to have problems, but it's how you work through them. And a lot of times, this age group that we work with, they don't know how to have, like the problem solving skills aren't always there.
Right.
Some things are going to happen that may be out of your control, but having healthy conversations is so huge. Healthy conversation isn't agreeing all the time. You got to be able to disagree with
Sure.
each other and agree. Agree to disagree. That's healthy in my opinion because you're not going to agree on everything. But learning how to have good, healthy problem solving skills when situations arrive and being good on timing of them is huge. But once again, go back to team bonding. You got to do things that are going to not so much trigger certain things, but do things where they have to work together through hard things, you know,
Hmm.
and pairing certain players up with other players. A lot of times it can get cliquish sometimes. So putting that freshman with that senior or that sophomore with that junior who you would never talk to each other, you know. When we first started, I let the seniors get their first lockers, and then I made all the underclassmen choose a locker but change it to how it was from last year. And then I made the seniors rearrange their lockers to where they had to be next to somebody they wouldn't normally be next to because you have
Oh
to
yeah.
build relationships with those who you wouldn't normally talk to because you don't know when you might need them. And that's on the court as well. You know, some players I knew that don't like each other had to be next to each other, and they ended up being the best of friends for the end of the season because they were right next to each other. You know, and it's
Yeah.
I'm going in circles, but the biggest thing is the team bonding. Being together is so big, and so once again, they get tired of it, but you're able to you get to know your players better, they get to know each other better, but also you get to work through things that might arise because we're already together.
It's almost like the way as you describe it, it's kind of like a workout, right? It's like those
Yes,
relationship building and those, team bonding
yes,
things. It's like working out like a muscle. Like you have to continually work out to get
yes,
stronger, right? You can't,
yes.
I've been in the trap and I've seen, that trap before where like people do team bonding and team stuff like in the summer and the off season. They think everything's good, but then like they don't continue on that, and then all of a sudden like it's not as strong a bond come
No,
December, January because it
no.
hasn't been addressed, right? So that's really cool though. I like that about like the rearranging of the lockers and moving
Mm-hmm.
around and everything like that because I think it's kind of like teaching, right? If you tell somebody to
Yes,
partner up with somebody, they'll just partner up with their friends if they have the choice. But you
right.
have to you gotta make that change because as you mentioned it, like I'm thinking about now like situations I had this past year where on our varsity group where we had girls who got hurt or other stuff came up and other players had to step up. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that they know each other now because that'd be pretty awkward if they
Right,
never interacted. Now all of a sudden
right.
it's a varsity game and this is your teammate on the court who you never spoke to. So, you gotta be purposeful of that. And
Well,
that's cool.
and locker room culture is also a big thing. I don't think people think about like how your locker room is just as big as team bonding, but like different cultures you have on the court. Because a lot of your things tend to fester from the locker room and it'll bleed out into the court. So having a positive locker room culture, like a habits, helps as you're trying to build on the court and off the court. You
Hmm.
know, so I'm big on like being clean. So the locker room can't be dirty. Take care of your things and make sure you make it better than what it was when you came in.
Yeah.
And now everyone knows I don't want to see things on the floor, trash, and like clean it up. But once again, it's that accountability and then clear expectations.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, that's no for sure. No, I completely agree. And I love that part too that you mentioned about like those conversations may not end with like agreement. And I think that that's
Hmm.
something that a lot of adults I feel just you
Yeah.
could learn from that too. But especially younger players who I think that there's this like idea that like if we don't agree at the end of a conversation like something's wrong. But like no, like you
Hmm.
can still disagree it, but like move on past it and still like
Right.
get along with each other. And
Right.
that's a good skill to learn at a younger age if they can learn that then, right?
Right.
No, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, so what, I'm curious with the relationships that you built, especially with your seniors, with kind of your older players, was there any conversations that you kind of had with them about like how to be mentors or how to be,
Mhm.
the leading by example? Because I think these freshmen and these younger grades, they so look up to who these seniors are and the
Mhm.
way that they carry themselves. And I know I've had to kind of had some of those conversations. I'm just curious if you had to have any this past year, if your seniors about, their own like peer leadership at all.
So it's funny. I keep saying it because my situation was so different being at Richmond because my seniors actually were freshmen on varsity because they didn't have any seniors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But I say that as in like it was a unique situation because they had to teach and learn within themselves how to be leaders. So a lot of our conversations were how to be a leader, what that looked like, how hard is it, and how to do it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and they learned a lot of things from me. But being a senior leader is very different than a head coach, in my opinion, because you're dealing with your age range, but also they're your friends. You got to lead them and be on them. You know, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times seniors they didn't want to. Some conversations were hard to have with each other because they didn't want to ruin the relationships, and that's where explaining good problem solving and how to do that correctly when issues arise. You
Yeah.
know, how to talk to each other, how to express what you're feeling and not always yelling or screaming or shutting down. Different things mentally you deal with that they grew through and they learned a lot from. And just it was, like I said, it was an amazing season. It was an amazing year because everyone grew
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, mentally. Everyone grew, and we just grew in so many aspects because we had to confront so much stuff early on to push past and get better.
Right.
So as far as leadership goes, we had it, but sometimes you have to realize it's in you. You just got to bring it out and do it without being nervous about ruining a relationship. When if you love that person, you're not ruining it, you're making them better.
Yeah, yeah. And it may be a little uncomfortable in the moment for them,
Yes,
right? It's not
yes,
always gonna be easy, but like it's long
yes,
term, right? You're the
yes,
adult, so you know like, okay, this is for the best in the long term,
yes.
definitely. You brought up coach, and I wanted to ask about like when did you this past year really like get that sense of like, okay, this is, going really well this year. I could tell that like we're these bonds are really are paying off and like we're really like doing well. Was there a point in the season where you kind of got that sense like, okay, like things have really come together and we're playing the way that we need to?
Yes, so we had a tournament. It's called the Coach Casey Poland's tournament. He was the previous coach years ago that had been there for years. I mean, like I had played against him because so the NCC conference is like your Richmond, your Marion, your Kokomo, like Lafayette, Jeff, and there was other teams like Newcastle that were part of it. Some of them have not; they're not in it anymore. But um, he was there for a while, and he passed away. So they had a tournament in his name because he was just so great.
Mm-hmm.
And we had made it to the championship of the tournament. And I don't think we've made it, I don't know how many years, but it's been a while. And I knew then when we got that far, it was clicking. And then we started winning games that people didn't think we could win. People underestimated us. And we started playing well. We started playing together, and like we were just gelling so much on the court that it transpired off the court in the locker room. It transpired when we go do team bonding things or when we would have a Christmas dinner. Like it just you could just
Yeah.
tell they were together. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying winning is everything, but they were playing unselfish.
Well,
You
it's
know,
yeah. I was just gonna add that like when you come in new and you're in the situation like you're in and things are going well with the relationships and they know that you care about them and all of that is going well, that definitely has huge significance. But then when they actually see it on the court that they're
mm-hmm,
doing well, then it's like, oh man, like not only do I have this like great relationship, but now I'm seeing this success on the court. Like you almost kind of like, as you mentioned, kind of like feel it all like coming together where they're
mm-hmm,
like completely excited about like
mm-hmm.
the whole program and where things are going. And I imagine then it's like, okay, we don't need to be, have too many more reminders about, clear expectations or like
Right. They
what you
had
say is your word. Like we could see where all this like pays off sort of thing.
well, and then they started even within themselves. They started hanging out outside of basketball without me having
Mm,
to
that's huge. Yeah.
do anything. It was just like, okay, they would meet up and have water guns. Like they would just do stuff together that was fun for themselves. And they let me know, okay, it's clicking, we're getting it. Now we can start building, you know. Um, but it's all a part of the process. Like I said, you have to go through things to get to beauty, you know, and I loved every moment of it.
Yeah, no, I mean when you see that those, it's so funny when you see players who it's like that you didn't even like talk to each other at the beginning of the year, and now you're like
Right,
can't
right,
be separated from each other. I can't even like keep you two apart, and it's just
right.
like that's such a fun process where when you like see them like kind of come together like that. That's
Yeah.
really really cool. And then as you kind of mentioned too, like like a special like season it is that you had, and now. I imagine as you kind of think about with the summer and the off season when you have the group that you do all the players that you do have returning there's so much that's already been built in and so
Mm-hmm.
much that's already been established where they kind of know like the importance
Mm-hmm.
of like the culture and everything about the expectations that like you can just build I'm sure so much off of that.
Well, and coach, it's funny. I keep saying it's funny because it's so easy to get down when things don't go your way. But I'm learning the blessings and the lessons that I'm as a young coach how to change your perspective. But we're going to be a very young group, and I'm very excited about
Hmm.
that because there's so much. These girls are sponges. You know, they're going to learn so much, soak in so much. That we're going to do a lot more things together now that I have a full summer and going into the the preseason. But being that I have 6 years graduating, and I'll be coming up with more seniors, of course, this upcoming season. We're already working on now. We're up to contact team building ideas. Putting certain players that have already in the high school, our younger players coming from eighth grade, with certain ones. So when we start in October, September, October, they're already acclimated to who they are, who's on the team, and who's in the school. I mean, just we're
Hmm.
building. We're just
Yeah.
building. We're just building, and I'm just super excited about the process.
Yeah, are there things that you are kind of like thinking about like wanting to like like I don't know if improve on is the best word, but as you kind of think of like okay, I'm with this group another year, like things that you're like looking at is like here's some other stuff that I'm going to continue to do or want to maybe try doing
Mhm.
to kind of make those relationships even stronger or like better this coming year.
Definitely. The biggest thing, like I said, is off court stuff. So
Hmm.
whether it's taking my seniors, we'll go get lunch and just being consistent within that and that relationship. The freshmen, taking them out, spending time with them, just building better relationships. I think the biggest thing I've learned throughout my entire season is the importance of relationship. We talk about it so much and we say the word so much, but it's that bond, that you're always there building that bond. And whether it's going out getting food, whether it's going to an event together that's not basketball related, but doing things together as a group to broaden our perspectives on things outside of basketball because it translates to the court.
Hmm.
Those tight knit groups that build together and are together, that's not all basketball. It's not all locker room. That's, hey, they may have went to Kings Island together and they did some other team bonding stuff. They may have there's so much you do, and but to answer your question, just spending
Yeah.
more time together and being together and learning learning my players more,
Yeah.
learning them
This
more.
there's always I feel like there's always like more, right? That I always like find out about my players. It's so fun. Like and I even have players who I've had for 4 years and they've been in the program and even like their senior year I like learn stuff about them. It's like, wait, like wait, there's like
Mhm.
this or like you have this or whatever. I had no idea about this in 4 years. It's like there's always stuff. It's like you never completely know your players all the way. You know them a lot, but there's always like new stuff that you could like figure out or learn about what they're into or what their interests are. It's always super fun.
It is because it also some things I might not know about, whether it's types
Mm.
of music or
Yeah.
types of art, and they'll bring about it because they're artsy and they love music. They may bring to my attention. So it's a learning experience for me as well that I'm excited about.
Yeah, there's a lot of like cultural stuff I know for me or stuff that they get into or things that or places they've been to or stuff that they've seen or experienced and it's just like,
Yes.
oh, it's really cool. Like it's like to like see all the stuff that they do, which is awesome. Coach, I wanted to ask you a specific question before we hit our concluding segment here, because this is something that's important to me. And I know as I say this question or ask it, it's kind of funny since I'm a guy who coaches girls basketball, but I feel like, at least in my area, I know there are not many guys who are coaching girls basketball. If you look at the varsity level around me, it's mostly guys. There's a couple women who coach girls basketball here, but it's mostly
Hmm.
males. And so I was curious about, what is it you think we as coaches can do to encourage our girls to, get into coaching and continue with the game in that way?
I actually I have been thinking about that as well, because even in my area, it's kind of backwards in my area. There's actually more men coaches coaching girls basketball than there is women.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, I honestly I can't even tell you because there is we need more of it.
Yep.
We need more examples of women for our young girls. But I think I don't know if it's promoting. I don't know, but that's like I'm trying to figure that question out myself.
It is like, I know something that I've tried, and maybe it's worked a little bit, is I think sometimes our girls like only, at least here, right, they only see guy coaches, and I think maybe
Hmm.
in their mind they think like, oh, this is just what guys do, like girls don't do this
Hmm.
sort of thing. And I think you have to like keep reminding them like, hey, you can do this, like this is
Hmm.
something that like you can
Hmm.
do or you can be a part of. And I know that even, if you can connect, at least I've tried to, and it's worked a little bit, connecting some of my high schools to like volunteer as like coaching
Yes.
like really young grades and like really, really
Yes.
young, and getting involved in that way, and things like that. And, encouraging, maybe even if it's encouraging players to like
Hmm.
lead drills and the kind of like get a sense of
Hmm.
like what it's like to like lead in a practice and stuff like that. But maybe it's just that our girls just like don't see it because they don't see the representation there on the
Right.
sidelines, right? And so you
But
almost have to like
Coach, but even
put it in their mind.
you saying that is huge too. Leading drills and helping out with camp stuff like that, because when they come back, that might spark the interest. So maybe that's another way of doing it too.
Hmm.
When you have players that enjoyed their experience in coaching high school basketball and in playing in high school basketball to come back to help, and that might spark the experience of wanting to get into it that way.
Yeah. And
That's why you about your relationship, the importance of it, and seeing how it impacted them and giving back.
Oh yeah, and I was just thinking too with that too, right? If you can have like your former players who come back, even if they're not, playing at a high level or playing in college, if they want to come back as, 20, 19, 20, 21 year olds, and come back and go through some drills or talk about that experience, like, to have like your alumni come back and stuff like that and do everything, like, man,
Right.
that'd be so cool, like, especially for younger players, be like, oh, look at this like adult here who,
Yes.
played under this coach, and like she's leading these drills or talking to us. And,
Oh yeah.
just that, like I said, that representation, that'd be really cool. I'm,
It's
I'm I'm
huge.
jotting this down as an idea now to contact some certain players about drills and see if they want to come
Hmm.
back. So you've jotted this down as an idea now that I'm gonna do after this. Um, to wrap up, Coach, and man, this has flown by. This has been so much fun. But there's a couple of
Hmm.
questions I love to ask every guest. So I'll go ahead and start here with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing our listeners would be able to learn from?
That's a wonderful question. I would say, I would honestly say taking when I got the job here at Richmond,
Mm-hmm.
um, the moment in that is bet on yourself and be willing to take an opportunity to get better within yourself, but also just bet on yourself. When I took the Richmond job, I had no idea, what would um, come up this season. I came in
Mm-hmm.
August. A lot of times your coaches want that summer, and I decided, I knew I was good enough to help build these young girls up to be better and to grow and to for myself to add impact to them to be great athletes, to where we had a good season going 12-12 and making it past the first round. Um, but just be confident in everything you do, whether that's coaching, teaching, whatever that is, bet on yourself. But do it in a impactful way that benefits the program. I'm probably saying it probably doesn't make sense to the listeners, and I apologize, but a lot of times we go into a situation we're not confident. So being confident wherever situation, opportunity that's been provided to you, to take it, to grow from it, to learn. Be willing to learn and grow. Be willing to be confident and betting on yourself. Because if you're provided an opportunity, that means that it's there for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's really just betting on yourself and we want to make an impact. It's not always about us, but bet on yourself. We want to make an impact.
Well, it's like kind of like what we've talked about, right? These traits and these characteristics and these things that we want to build in our players, like live that yourself by taking that chance, right? Putting yourself out there, because that's what we want our players to do if they were in a situation like that. We tell them to go for it, right?
And this is the best decision I've made. Legitly best decision I've ever made, because I've grown as a young professional.
Mm-hmm.
I'm impacting. I'm giving them leadership skills, but I've grown so much. I'm excited about what's to come, because I know my players are growing in that aspect as well. But if I didn't bet on myself and be confident what I was doing, you think about where would you be, but I'm just thankful that I was confident to be blessed with an opportunity to impact others. Just by betting on myself, knowing there's a will, there's a way to get things done. So betting on yourself,
Coach, you gave me like such a good like a little final thought there, but I'm gonna ask for one more from you, because I love to give every guest what I call like this 60-second soapbox. You can go over 60 seconds. I'm not gonna time you, but I love to always give guests a platform to kind of get out like a final thought, a closing message, a final idea, just something in general that they can leave the listeners with. You can take it any direction you want: life, basketball, coaching, whatever you want, because it's your soapbox. So hopefully, Coach Gabby, if you don't mind, you got one more a bit of wisdom or knowledge that you would want to share with us, because I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor here and let you take it from here.
Awesome, Coach. I feel like I've been everywhere in this entire conversation with you. So I feel like they can learn one more thing too. I appreciate that. The biggest thing I would leave to anybody would be the importance of knowing yourself, the importance of being confident in yourself, and the importance of being a leader. You never know who's watching. So those qualities, making sure that you know yourself, know what you can do, and how you want to impact others is important. I've been in situations where people come to me and seeing things I've done, and I realize I'm not doing it for the accolades, but because I love different groups that I have and how I want to impact. But just being confident. I say that so much because you'd be surprised when you're dealing with your young student athletes, how you have to build that into them. But like you said, if you don't have it in yourself, it's hard to build that. So being confident in what you're trying to do, caring and impacting these kids. It's about the programs, about the girls and the kids, and just being confident. That's the biggest thing. All you do, be confident in all you do. Take the risk, make mistakes, learn from them. But be confident in all you do. Be confident in all you do.
Excellent. Yeah. No, great point to leave off. Whatever you do confidently, for sure. Coach Gabby, again, thank you so much for coming on here. I love hearing all the passion, all the excitement that you have. It's really, invigorating for me to, hear about somebody so passionate as you are about relationship building and how important it is and the ways to do it. I appreciate, everything that we touched on about, building relationships, holding players accountable, making sure that you have, an environment where teammates are great to each other, and all of the team building and team bonding. So, I mean, it's so cool to have heard your story and your journey over the past year, that it's going to be really exciting to continue to follow like where you and the program go from here. So again, Coach, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and best of luck going forward. I really appreciate your thoughts.
Coach Hernandez, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. I love being able to help any way I can and give advice, because I'm still learning myself, but I appreciate this so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.